Welcome, everyone, to the Schmodown Night in Canada Teams Tournament special. And tonight, well, everybody's sort of missing. Soda has something, and he's in the back hosting the stream at the moment. Lou and Dave both have internet troubles, so I brought on the best person if we're going to talk teams, stats, people's backgrounds, especially for a couple of these teams we don't even know about yet. We brought the truth, Frankie Numbers Janish. How's it going, Frank?
That's right. How's it going, man? Good to be here.
Yeah, and there's so many things I actually want to talk to you about because I'm, like you, very interested in players' numbers and their strengths and weaknesses, and so many new teams to talk about. So
yeah,
mostly we should start with, well, who do we think is going to win this tournament?
Oof, that you starting off with the tough one there. Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's hard pressed to say that the favorites are not Founding Fathers and the Odd Couple to get to the finals there, and then between those two teams, who could win? I don't know. I mean, you look at the run that Jeff has had within the singles tournament and how that potentially carries over into this tournament. You look at how Roca has played, and he's played pretty well. He just doesn't have the wins in his favor. Dan Merle has played really well, and had to overcome some holes throughout his singles campaign this year. Can they put it all together for a winning run here in the tournament? It's between these two teams for me, Odd Couple and Founding Fathers. I kind of want to say the Odd Couple. I just think throughout the whole year, Founding Fathers, or rather the Exchange, have somewhat under delivered. Not so much Merle. I mean, he obviously holds the singles title belt right now and took it from Bateman at the start of the year. But I think when you look at the rest of that squad, whether it's Barbarian or Roca or Bateman, I think they haven't quite lived up to what their standards are. Now, their standards far exceed a lot of the max potential for all the other factions. So it's not like I'm really knocking them or I'm saying that they're bad. I'm just saying that their expectations and standards are so high that it's more than the max for a lot of these other factions, and they just haven't quite met them yet. That's why they're not leading the faction race at the moment. But I think what Jeff has done throughout the singles tournament is going to give Andrico a boost because he's been working on his game this year. And I think he's really anxious. And I think once they get together here through the first round and potentially throughout the rest of the tournament and win the thing, yeah, I think they can do it. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Odd Couple, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Founding Fathers either. But I will officially pick the Odd Couple to win the tournament.
I mean, I've been saying it on our show basically every week, every match that he's been in. And recently, I'm not going to count Jeff Snyder out of a 5-round match. So if they get there, I really cannot put the odds out of his favor looking at the Patriots days. But I have a reason to believe that Deception is going to be very good, and personally, I have Final Exam making it past the Founding Fathers and into the finals. So, again, this is such a small tournament. It's a number of coin flips in some instances. So, really, it comes down to the players on that day, and that's kind of what we want to get into a little bit here. Starting off with, might as well do the play-in match between the Witching Power and the Misfits. We got two new teams, but many old faces. Can you tell us anything about Adam Witt, really? Because he's the one who has played six.
Yeah, with Adam Witt, I think there's not a whole lot for us to go off of at the moment. I mean, he's appeared here and there. Obviously, He's doing some Star Wars, and now he's doing here in the teams, and it's and then you look back at his time when he's with Movie Guys with Paul Preston there. I think Adam Witt's like really good. I also think I think he's really good at what he knows or what he's familiar with. He's really good at those. It's once you get outside of his range, which we still don't really have a gauge of per se. I think once you get outside of his range, um, I think the confidence lacks there for him. I don't know how that's going to jive with Zipper, although I think Zip's game has been elevated this year, and it has been elevating for the past season or so. I think they make a great team up. I can tell you on draft night when they were both drafted into the dungeon, and it was kind of after the draft and all that stuff. We're all out with everybody. These two guys were very excited to team up and see what they could do, and that was way back in January. And now here we are towards the end of the year, and so I'm very excited to see these two guys team up and combine forces because I think it could be something fairly special given the fact that the dungeon hasn't had a great year. I think that's a glimmer of hope for them, and I think Adam Witt and Eric Zipper make a pretty good pairing because I think Zip and his strengths can complement or at least shore up some of the weaknesses of Adam Witt and vice versa. To what extent, I'm not sure yet. Nobody's really sure yet, and that's part of the fun of watching those two guys team up for this play-in match against the Witching Power.
Yeah, we here actually had the pleasure of interviewing both Eric Zipper and Adam Witt together. The video should come up like right before this one. We hung out with them, got to know their team, their dynamic, and played some newlyweds game with them to test their team chemistry before they got into the trenches.
Great.
It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
I do think that the chemistry in that team is already there. And I mean, can't say less about the other team. They are clearly a duo that they do a show together or used to do a show. I don't follow all of the different movie podcasts, but we got Haley Fouch and Perry Nemiroff making up the Witching Power. I really liked Perry this year. She looks like she's really dialed into the game, and I don't really know much about Haley Fouch other than like I've seen her in a couple of matches. I know her face, and I can't really tell you how well she's played.
Yeah, Haley Fouch is someone that I think is, for as little as she has played, I think she still garners a lot of respect from other competitors within the league. They know of her history and her work outside of the game. Obviously, her being paired up with Perry is a huge boost, and I think probably something that Haley definitely welcomes. She was previously teamed up with Kalen Corrigan, and with that team didn't really do a whole lot. The Scream Queens there, but I think it was clear that Haley could do something in this game. She had a tough singles match against Ethan Irwin last year, and it didn't really go her way. It was a live event, so a couple of factors not really in her favor there. She's still growing into what this league is and where she fits in. I like to think of her as the next Eric Zipper or the next Liz Shannon Miller in terms of really coming into her own. And I think this tournament could potentially do that for her. And she's going to have a stable presence with her and Perry Nemiroff. Like you said, they do a podcast together, The Witching Hour, which is, now their team name is The Witching Power. So I think that's a huge advantage right off the bat when you compare them to Misfits that they have over them. So given the fact that Haley has played pretty decently and Perry, I think, has a newfound confidence and love for the game, I think that's a really powerful combination coming into this match that the Misfits should not take lightly, given the fact that Perry seems to have this hunger. Haley Fouch does seem to have the capability to play a strong game. I think she's fared pretty well in that singles match. She's had a couple where she's been played pretty good. Again, that she also played Eric Zipper, in a great match. So now that she has a different partner in Perry as opposed to Kalen Corrigan, I like this opportunity for them to get a win here. I think it's gonna be a tough match, but it's again, you referenced it earlier. It's kind of a coin flip here because we just don't know about these teams. Both of these teams have never played together. Sure, some have more chemistry built outside of the game coming into it, so maybe that's where you might want to wager your bet if you're trying to do that sort of thing. But I really couldn't tell you one way or the other. This is gonna be a great playing match. But if I were to pick, I think I would like to go the Misfits there. I just think with Eric Zipper, the way he's approached the game, Adam Witt, same thing. I think they can pull off a tough victory.
Like the chemistry is clearly there with both teams, and they are heading up towards a team with a lot of chemistry and a lot of matches behind them. I I cannot truly pick a winner between the Misfits and the Witching Power, but I'm seeing a hard time for either of them getting past the Founding Fathers because a couple of teams belts in their back pocket, and we know what these guys can do.
Yeah, that's the thing. Once that playing match is over, Founding Fathers will go up against a 1-0 team, which compared to their resume is very inexperienced, and especially with the online format, it kind of evens it out a little bit. But even still, John and Dan have that chemistry, whether it's in person or online, that will be beneficial. And no doubt that Perry and Haley, or whether it's Adam or Eric, they're going to have a degree of chemistry and gameplay. But no matter the format, the fact is that Founding Fathers has just spent more time together, have accomplished more, obviously, than whoever they face in the first round here for them. So, yeah, it's going to be awfully hard. And Dan Merrill is playing incredible this year. So is John, despite, the wins not racking up in his favor. But, yeah, I find it real hard to believe that the Founding Fathers could not get past the Witching Power or the Misfits, whichever one it was going to be. So the Founding Fathers should definitely be right there in these semis real quick.
Yeah, I can definitely see them moving on, and they're basically easily like looking like the best team in this tournament until like I I like to look at some numbers, right? And I noticed there are some accuracy compliments to one of the teams I want to talk about next, which we'll stay on the left side of the bracket and go with Tom and Paul versus Final Exam. Um, if we're talking about Tom and Paul Preston is 0-3, but has a 97% teams accuracy. What does that even mean?
I mean, he's just really good in those first rounds. That's where a lot of that comes from.
Mhm.
And when you look at their final rounds, whether they take a 2 or a 3, players can be 50-50 on those. But generally, I would say, you're probably near a more 75, 80% clip, correct on those numbers, depending what they're taking a 2 or a 3. A higher percentage for twos, obviously you'd like to think at least, and then maybe a little bit of a drop there on a 3, on a 3-point accuracy rate. But Paul and Tom, those guys are a great team because they can play great first rounds. It's after that I think they haven't quite figured it out. And to be fair, they haven't had really an opportunity to do so. And it's very tough to do, I think, for those two types of personalities to figure that type of thing out in an online setting. So uh, it's kind of unfortunate that's the way that they've had to start off their team that way. Because I think if it was an
Mhm.
in person thing, I think they could really figure out a rhythm there. Because I think Paul Preston's one of those guys. When you look at who came into the league with Adam, he really knows how to play off somebody and feed up that energy and kind of take cues and figure out where to fit in. With a character like Tom's, I think it's pretty tough to do that online, and it takes, I think, a certain level of familiarity to figure out how to do that. But Tom and Paul just haven't had that opportunity, so I'm curious to see how much character we get from Tom in these matches, or matches, whatever it's going to be, and see where they find some common ground right off the bat. And I don't know what they've been doing to prepare for this. If there's been mock matches, or how many Zoom sessions, or whatever they've been doing, I'd be real curious to see what their dynamic looks like on game day.
Mhm. In a small way, I do believe not practicing their chemistry works better, because their whole thing is that they are so different from each other. And I mean, in that first match we did get of them in the studio, Paul seems very like put off by Tom.
Yeah.
And I find it works very well if you're not actually planning for it. This stuff just kind of hits you. And that stunned bit is just as fun as having the immediate quip to follow up. But we we also have like, yeah, they only have one match under their belt together, but they now both have a pretty good amount of matches under their belts as a whole, and I do hope that they get a chance to really showcase their abilities. Whereas, I mean, I still want Final Exam to beat them, and I think like Final Exam can do some damage in this tournament for sure. But like, Tom and Paul are one of the more fun teams, more knowledgeable teams, and I don't expect them to like I don't expect them to be knocked out ever, let alone out of this tournament very
Mhm.
easily. And if we move over to Final Exam, one thing I was a little disappointed. I haven't really talked about Final Exam on this show before, but I really liked Paul Oyama last year.
Yeah.
I really liked that really kind of overconfident, mean kid vibe, that like, I'm just gonna play the rules and be like a game shark and be just better than everyone at Schmodown.
Yeah.
And then it was going to be like, oh, if he teams up with like a professor character, he's going to be like, and then they flipped the whole dynamic on me, thinking he was going to be the problem student to the professor, and now we have, I don't know what we have in the delinquent, and we have a
Yeah.
very easygoing Paulo Yama, which has kind of led to him, I think, like, he scores better, but he doesn't win better anymore. It seems different from his rookie season, at least.
Yeah, I think there was such a different vibe around Paul Oyama last year coming into the league. He's fresh, he's a rookie, he's from the fan leagues, and he's in the dungeon with Kaiser, and that brings a whole different kind of attitude and aura, presence when he would play a match. That whole Yeah, you're right. Like, that whole kind of dynamic he had going on last year has been completely just thrown out the window. It's completely brand new with Winston, and um, his managerial style, and then obviously Paul Yama's kind of turning over the leaf here with a new type of approach and demeanor in the game. So I don't know if he played John Roca this year. It's a tough loss. He played fairly well. I think coming off of Spectacular, I think he did pretty well in a singles environment, but in teams, I mean, he's been one of the best teams players this year. I mean, he's been lights out, save for like one or two instances, which players are
Hmm.
bound to have. But he's played. He's one of the more impressive team players, I think, this year. And I think with Lon Harris, I think it affords him to probably play a little bit more freer, I think, and not worry so much, because he knows that the guy next to him, Lon Harris, is very knowledgeable, and that eventually that I think Paul might look at Lon Harris as like a source of information in which he can pull out answers. Because I think what Paul and Lon, I think maybe both see each other this way, that there's so much information within each other. It's like, okay, if we don't know the question off the top of our heads, how are we able to extract that information from each other to get to the right answer? And I think because they know so much that if they can just ask each other the right questions to get to the right answer, I think they're very confident that they can do that and go a long way. That's what I really love about Paul and Lon, is that they have vast amounts of knowledge, and each guy's got to figure out, if we don't know that answer off the top of our head, how do we pull out of each other to get to the right answer? And I think that's what makes them one of the more dangerous teams in a long time. When you look at what they're able to do, and look, they lost to Shazam, who are now the team champs, and it was a tough match, and they gave him a great fight. And so, yeah, I like to think Final Exam and Founding Fathers are gonna see each other in that semifinal, and whoever wins that one, that's gonna be a hell of a battle.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I thought like Lon Harris has been one of those competitors who was just waiting for the Paulo Yama or Ben Bateman type team partner to really like when I saw those two draft picks come up and that was going to be a team, I kind of branded them with a championship right away, because it might not happen right away, but you put those two guys up enough against a large enough set of questions, and they're eventually going to come out with belts.
Right. Yeah, I think it's certainly within their reach. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Paulo Yama has been one of the most insane teams players this year. Very close to like Chance Ellison and him, and maybe Dan would be like my top 3 teams players of this year. Just because we haven't seen enough of these. I mean, this whole next side of the bracket, we're going to talk about one old team who's been around since Anarchy, and a bunch of teams who were made 3 weeks ago. It's a little longer than that, but
exactly.
So if we move over to the odd couple, who gets category 9 as their opponent. We talked about odd couple at the beginning, but again, I think Jeff Snyder and Andreyko are, again, kind of the perfect dynamic, and their knowledge bases complement each other. And even the recent thing of Andreyko has seen every Schmodown match recently, and Jeff supposedly never studies a day in his life. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have the different dynamics of study philosophy as well, and how that team works out will depend on Jeff Snyder, in my opinion, but it will win if he is confident. That's what I think.
Yeah, well, I don't think you have to worry about the confidence in Jeff Snyder, because I don't think Roxy, I think, clearly will not let him get to a place in his head where that's acceptable, and I'd like to think that Andreyko at the same time would kind of take up a little bit of that mantle as well, to like, Jeff, look, we just got to stay focused and we'll be good to go. And not to mention, I think also Jeff having the ability or the capability to lean on Andreyko in moments here and there, whenever the case may be, I think is reassuring for Jeff. So that if he gets a category that he's just not, let's say if he got a category in singles, let's say it was 70s, okay, again, and they got 70s in teams. But Andreyko, let's just say that he was really really good in 70s. Snyder's not going to react the same way that he normally would if it was just him, if it was just a singles match and he got 70s. He's go, all right, look, I don't know how much help I'm going to be here, but I know I got my buddy Andreyko. So it's not like it's going to completely throw Snyder out of whack. I just don't think there's really kind of any scenario that's going to do that to Jeff with Roxy and Andreyko in his corner now. So that makes him a very, very dangerous guy, because now he believes that he can get anything right, even if he hasn't seen the movie or heard the movie, because of who he's got in his corner. And I think that's very dangerous for teams going up against them, to have to face. The Odd Couple has won a belt. they beat the Shire Wolves, one of the greatest teams of all time. Um, they've accomplished some pretty cool stuff in their time in their 10-match run. So there's no doubt in my mind that I think they make it to the finals, and because I just think the experience over these other three brand new teams, um, I think it's going to not only put everything over the edge, but they just have so much going in their favor, and they really lucked out on this side of the bracket, to tell you the truth.
I really do. Well, I mean, once we get into this last one, which is one of both the biggest toss-ups and possibly two of the strongest teams in the tournament, so who really knows about that final bracket? But when we get into category 9, and we're looking at a brand new competitor in Jader Paramo and a guy who's only played in Inner Geekdom in Brandon Hanna.
Yeah.
Um, I was saying just before we started recording, I do actually think Brandon Hanna knows a few things about generalized movies. I've seen some of his podcasts. Sadly, for me, I guess, because this is the Hitman, right?
Right,
But
right.
you know, he knows a thing or two about movies, and I don't expect this team to do horribly, but I don't know if they have even a shot at beating the Odd Couple. Like a team with such experience and two guys who have maybe met 3 times. I'm really unclear on how that is all going to shake down.
Yeah, I think with category 9, it's interesting. You bring up the Brandon Hanna thing. He's only played Inner Geekdom. Um, but I do think, yeah, there is a level of knowledge there in terms of general trivia. I think part of that's because just by extension of who he has to study for in Inner Geekdom, some of that's going to spill over just into general trivia as well. And then I also think, you know, most people who get into this are fans of movies that aren't geek movies per se. They're a fan of all movies, and Brandon's no different. I think he sees a wide array of movies just like almost anybody else in the league. So whether or not he can extract that information or he's retained that information is another story, which he'll be put to the test. But he knows how to prepare for the game.
Mm.
Inner Geekdom does do that for you in terms of how to prepare for the game. Now, you're obviously not going to pool that same type of regimen for general trivia as you would for Inner Geekdom, but you modify it, you see what's more reasonable, what you could do, and at least you're not going into a match like this and saying, well, I've seen a ton of movies throughout the course of my life. Let's see what happens. He's not doing that. So I think he's going to come in prepared more than most would like to think. And then when you look at Jader, the guy's a rookie and he's had a hell of a story. He's won a couple matches this year, won a tournament match, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he beat Brittany Young earlier in the year. Now he's here playing in teams, and I like his story. I like his progression so far as a rookie, as a fan plucked out of the crowd. He's playing some big spots this year. He was only guaranteed one match, and look what he's turned that into. So he's a true gamer. It's great to have him in the league, and I'm very curious to see how he's going to play in a team setting because thus far he has proven to be a very, very competent round one player. Will that continue here? I don't know because players do have these little dips in their round one play. You look at someone like Mike Kalinowski. You look at someone like Lon Harris. They can have these dips and then come right back up and put up 7 or 8 points in the first round. Jader has pretty much been consistent with those 7 points first rounds. It's been the second round where he's been very suspect, where he's run into
Mm-hmm.
trouble. But now he has a teammate to lean on. And while Brandon is not experienced outside of Inner Geekdom, there is still an experience factor to take note of with Brandon. So I think that can be beneficial for their game in the second round. And again, it just kind of depends on the wheel. I think, especially for these guys, more so than the Odd Couple. But if they get a solid round 2 category, they're going to make the Odd Couple sweat, I think, in that final round. But yeah, I still see the Odd Couple coming out on top in this one.
Yeah. way back when, in his tournament match, I had to defend Jader quite a bit. I may have called him the only non-charity case in the Schmodown, kind of off of Roxy calling him a charity case, because most of the league did get in just by being friends with Christian or friends with somebody else, but Jader came out of nowhere and had to keep winning, or they were just gonna tell him to leave, right?
Right.
That's essentially what happened to him. And he's made the most of what he's got, and he's coming into I it's going to be a tough teams tournament, but it's going to be some valuable experience for such a young player. And so I think with that, we can get into this final bracket. Down in the bottom right, we have the lethal weapons and deception. That's Andrew Guy and Ethan Irwin, and then Adam Collins, the winner of the singles tournament, and another rookie from Corruption, Marisol McKee. Um, both of them played excellently in the tournament. I was very disappointed to see Marisol lose to Paul because she played such a good match even then and could have beat him by as much as he beat her by, and we could have seen a very different looking singles tournament. But I I really like this team.
Yeah, there's something about deception. This is, when this was announced and Adam Collins had not yet won the tournament yet, there's still this talk of like, man, deception, that's a scary looking team. We only
Mhm.
seen Marisol play a couple times. We've seen Adam Collins do, I think at that time, I think he had knocked out Lon Harris by that time. I can't quite remember when this was all announced specifically, but nonetheless,
Mhm.
he had definitely TKO'd Roca. Maybe I think he was just about to play the kid, maybe. I don't know. Um, yeah, there's just something about Adam Collins and Marisol as a team that I just can't get it out of my head that they're going to win. I don't know about the whole tournament, but I think they really are gonna win this match, um, because obviously Adam Collins, I mean, the dude's an absolute machine. And when
Mhm.
you have someone that can you have a teammate that can complement you, maybe not necessarily in the match your level of play for Adam Collins, but Marisol and the way she played against Bonnie and the way she played against Paul, she had a presence and a demeanor and an approach about her that you just don't find very often in rookies. And that's what makes Adam Collins and Marisol very, very special rookies this year, is that they've come into this game as if they've been playing for 5 years and that they've
Mm.
been in this type of setting, that they've been in these types of situations for years now. And they haven't. They haven't. I mean, sure, families is one thing, but when you go up against the likes of now an Ethan Irwin and Andrew Guy, who have story-rich histories, and Adam
Mhm.
Collins is now the singles tournament champion. You know, there's no telling what their confidence level is, and I'm sure it's very high in terms of Collins and Marisol McKee. They're going to be really, really good, and while we still have a very small sample size of Marisol, there's just something when you watch her play and you compare her to Andrew Guy, you go, Marisol could beat Andrew Guy. You just
I was
you just know that in a way that you can't really point towards any facts. You just kind of know that. Well, now when it comes to Adam Collins and Ethan Irwin, you're like, well, I don't know if Adam Collins could beat Ethan Irwin, but at the same time, now I'm not sure that Ethan Irwin could beat Adam Collins heads up.
mm.
So when you start comparing A players to B players like that, you say, well, I think Deception has the edge here, and that could very well be the case here, that Deception just barely edges out Lethal Weapons.
Yeah, this one is gonna be one of the other ones. I consider like this match, the play in, and then the Tom Paul final exam. Those are the big like it's a 50-50 match,
Hmm.
really. And it's honestly insane to say that about two rookies playing Ethan Irwin and
Yeah.
one of the best teams players of all time. Andrew Guy is 12-6. Like that's a lot of teams victories.
Yeah.
And to think if you got to play two of the Lila Forties, and now we have like the undefeated Adam Collins, who Ethan Irwin just missed getting to play. We could have got some a little bit play. Jeff ruined that. we we do know though that this I was kind of making the same comparison you were, but I was thinking of it in like I was thinking Lady Justice versus the Dastard instead of Marisol versus Guy. I
Sure.
hadn't taken it to gameplay yet, but I was just wondering, like we're gonna get some very interesting play in that match, both character work and uh, trivia work.
Yeah. I think
And you were saying?
no, yeah. Yeah, for Lethal Weapons, it's if this Andrew guy was the Andrew guy that we saw play against Ben Bateman, a month or two ago, or whatever it was, even like even if before they played, like that type of Andrew guy, that character that he was rolling with, if that was the type of guy that was rolling into this tournament with Ethan Irwin, I would be like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about the substance chances. It's kind of like a 2-on-1 at this point, and like Adam Collins can on his own could hold his own against Ethan Irwin. Now with Marisol and by his side, yeah, I think they're looking pretty good. But now that we've had this switch, this shift in Andrew Guy,
Mm,
it makes it a very, very intriguing matchup now because this type of Andrew Guy brings about a more focused, a more fiery type of player, a more competitive type of player in Andrew Guy. And he's definitely going to need that against these two rookies who definitely have something to prove. Yeah, Adam Collins is the singles tournament winner, but if you talk to him, he still feels like there's still more to prove. He still has to. There's still people out there for him to shut up still, right? Despite being
mm.
6-0, right? He still has that mentality, and he's going to need it against Ethan Irwin and Andrew Guy because Ethan Irwin is an absolute machine. Andrew Guy, you talk about his team's record, 12-6. You can say he's been the B player in all his teams, but he's contributed in big spots to get that record, to earn that record. So I have no reason to believe that Andrew Guy won't show up in this match, because he showed up plenty of times for when he was teamed up with the family. He teamed up plenty of times when he was teamed up with Ben Bateman in Team Action. I think he'll
Mhm.
do it here for Ethan Irwin because I think he knows he has a real opportunity here, like he had with Drew McWeeny, to really do something special, go on a long run. Because if he can do that with Drew McWeeny, he can certainly do that with Ethan Irwin. And when you get that type of confidence in an Andrew Guy, very dangerous. And this could be, I think, Deception versus Lethal Weapons. I think it could be match of the tournament, to tell you the truth, like at least for the first round.
I mean, looking at the first couple of matches, it is my most anticipated match. It's been ours at Schmoes of the North's most anticipated match for like a while. We kind of went through them and just like Deception was one of the teams that most people want to see in action, and that
Yeah,
match is one that everybody wants to know about. Because what were you just saying about Andrew's character? And it was, were you calling it a change or a switch?
a shift.
Because
Yeah,
yeah, I'm not so sure about that myself
you
because
think it might
there
be
were
temporary? What we saw?
Oh yes, there were
Okay.
definitely some moments in the Ethan match where he was managing that I I don't want to say the Shmominati has found Andrew Guy and is forcing him to say words on camera, and
Interesting.
that's absolutely not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that that's
But you kind of
absolutely
said
what's
it. You kind of said
happening.
it.
Yeah, I'm just not saying it so they don't come for me.
Okay.
I
Right.
know
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
know a couple of people personally, and it's very worrying.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I do believe that um, honestly, if good or bad happens, we could see Andrew flip at any moment, and
Mm.
we do not like. I wouldn't try and make Andrew Guy do anything that he didn't want to do. So if he gains, like, I don't know, if he breaks whatever brainwashing is on him at the moment, he will possibly go back to being that character we saw play Ben Bateman. But I'd like to see that sort of clarity, I'll say, in his consciousness, while also maybe keeping up the style of play he had with the family. Because
Yeah.
just just last year and even at the start of this year, they played very well. Like Andrew has had good, very good teams matches,
Hmm.
and I don't think that singles is his game, and playing Ben definitely is not his game.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't distrust that Andrew is looking for a team's belt, and he wants one more than most people want one, I think.
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah.
I mean, he's tried it with so many teams. He's gotten so close with a lot of them.
Yeah.
He may have just, I mean, if you're gonna lose Drew McWeeny, getting Ethan Irwin isn't a bad consolation prize.
That's for
That's
sure. Yeah.
And that pretty much wraps up our talk on the teams. Is there anything? Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier that I have final exam in the finals of the tournament. I may as well reveal now. I have. I'm I'm a corruption fan, so I clearly have deception winning the whole tournament and going to take the belts back from Shazam. Maybe not getting there because that's a lot of eggs to put in a basket
Sure.
at this moment, but uh, I do think this team will both surprise people. They won't know what to play against them because small enough game tape, even in Adams' 6 games, like, and we haven't seen a category he's bad in, so look
Yeah.
out for that. So I do think Deception can get into the finals and really do some damage.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see this story continue for Deception, for Adam Collins, for Marisol, for Corruption. I'd love to see that story continue. I'm all for that. I just think once they get, if they can get past Lethal Weapons, you know, um, they're going to run into presumably the Odd Couple, and Jeff has gotten revenge lately after players he's fallen to. He did it
Yeah.
against Paul Yama. He did it against Ethan Irwin. He could do it again against Adam Collins this time in a team setting. So, and look, I picked Odd Couple to win this tournament. So, which if I'm Corruption, I'm okay with that because that means Final Exam or Founding Father doesn't win it, doesn't get to play
Mhm.
spectacular, and that's good for the faction race. So, as long as if Deception were to get to a position to play Odd Couple and they lost, well, then you're rooting for Odd Couple the whole way, or the rest of the way. So, and that's not a bad team to have to uh, put one or two of your eggs in that basket to help fend off final exam, swag or the FinSec exchange to hold on to the faction title. So
Mm.
uh, yeah, this is going to be really really interesting these next few weeks and how not just these teams make it through this little tiny tournament, but how
Mhm.
the points factor in. Because if Deception can get this win over Lethal Weapons, that puts them in a really great spot. Even if they were to lose the next match, puts them in a really good spot heading into Spectacular, right? Because Deception is their last. Well, they also have that Dewberry Makuga match coming up, so
Yeah, and they're separated by about 7 points from Swag at the moment,
yeah,
which I guess at the moment, let's say Ace wins that Star Wars match against Damon, and then it's Chance versus Chandru to decide the faction title between those two teams.
but then let's say, but then you have that the singles title between Adam Collins and Dan Murrell. So
Yeah.
Corruption still has another opportunity there. I personally don't think Ace is going to beat Alex Damon at Spectacular, so I kind of put that one to the side. But if Ace were somehow to do the unthinkable and do that, then man, Swagger would be in prime position to capture the faction title at Spectacular. But I just don't know that. I don't think that's a real possibility, given the way Alex Damon has been so dominant.
Yeah, I mean, I can only go off him talking about how there are a number of questions he didn't know in this most recent tournament, but also you gave Alex Damon like 6-8 months to study exclusively Star Wars, knowing exactly who he's going to go up against, and
Yeah,
that's a hard sell for anybody to go in there and try and beat him. But you kind of feel the same way with the Chandru and Chance match of like, I mean, I don't want to give either of those guys that much time to study
yeah.
IG exclusively, and that might be the first perfect IG game. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, I mean that's going to be a tough one. I mean, I think Chance certainly has his work cut out for him there because Chandru has only had to focus on IG.
Oh yeah.
He's a one divisional player. Chance is a triple threat, so his mind's constantly working, which in three different ways. But now, now that he does not have to defend the teams at Spectacular, for better for worse, he can solely focus on Inner Geekdom. And to me, that's the worst thing that could have happened to Chandru if he's really wanted to be the first player since Hector Navarro or Jason Niman rather, to defend the belt. Not the best thing for Chandru, but I think Chandru still has the edge there. But Chance is going to give him, I believe, one hell of a fight. But you never know. You never know. I thought Kevin Smith was going to give Chandru a hell of a fight, and that didn't turn out to be the case. But Chance and Corruption, they do have one thing that the Dungeon and Kevin Smith didn't know is how tenacious Chandru and Winston are going to approach that match. Corruption can be prepared for that. Chance can be prepared for that now in a way that I don't think Kevin and Kaiser could have fully anticipated. I know that they did anticipate it, but it's one thing to kind of like draw it up in your own mind and say, hey, look, they do this, we can do this. It's another thing to actually see it happen in real time and then have to deal with it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting battle between those two guys.
Yeah, and it's very interesting I mean, if one of these teams goes out, that makes it a very different ball game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very interesting to kind of look at this big teams tournament and think that it might not actually make a difference at the end of the year because there are less points in this tournament than Corruption can collect at Spectacular as of today, let alone like if they get through this one and bring a third match into Spectacular. Same thing for Swag. Like they got a couple of matches at the big show. They're a little bit behind, but if Corruption if Corruption drops out of this tournament and can't pick up those extra points, you could just win it all on the last at Spectacular. And it's very fun to look at like the last couple of matches and just go like from the beginning we wouldn't have guessed these two factions fighting at the end, but since about the middle of the year we have been looking at these two and the Finstock Exchange as just the people who will be fighting at Spectacular. And currently, other than Alex Damon, they're the only people with spots booked at the show. Oh, it's Shazam too. My bad. I was forgetting them.
Yeah, like that's a great thing that for. I mean, yeah, it is unfortunate for like teams like Swag and Founding Fathers, or FinTech Exchange, that this is a very truncated tournament, because if it were like a normal field, well then they could certainly the FinTech Exchange could certainly find themselves in a comfortable position to win the faction title at Spectacular. That's not the case, really. Even if they win the whole thing, they still got to do some work, and there's a lot of different scenarios. But at the end of the day, the most likely is I don't expect Founding Fathers to be in a position heading into Spectacular to control their own destiny. I think Corruption is obviously right now in position to control their own destiny and win at Spectacular to have a points lead going into Spectacular. But Swag, if they win the whole thing and Makuga beats Dewberry, and let's say Swag also wins the horror free for all, that's another 3 points. They could find themselves with a league going to Spectacular and hold their own destiny in their own hands. So I fully expect it really to come down to Corruption and Swag, but I know FinStock Exchange might make it a little interesting.
Yeah, they aren't too far behind. I honestly don't know what Finstock Exchange does in the horror free for all, because
that's another thing.
I believe they're keeping the competitors under wraps as of now. I don't know anything about it, but this has happened by the time we've dropped this video. So whoever picked up those points
right.
Yeah, definitely will make a mark if it is one of those couple of factions. But then, I mean, the quirky mercs can just play spoiler for the Finstock Exchange or Swag, or just
100%.
do whatever they want if they can do some interesting things in this teams tournament.
Well, I mean, if you're Corruption, you're big fans of Quirky Mercs. Then you want them to just wreck all kinds of havoc, because Corruption's in the lead. So it's like cool.
And now that like they are mathematically out of it, you can root for them to win every match that you're not involved in and just take all of those points. Koi can have them all. He can make his case for Manager of the Year, and Shannon might still have a stronger one. So like and then it's an award versus the faction trophy, let's call it, because I don't know exactly what they're doing, but
I don't know either.
I'll take the faction prize over the Modi personally, but Shannon's got a good case for both of them at this point. And Winston too. We are looking at 2 rookie managers as both the winner and the Manager of the Year. They might both get one each. It's going to be very interesting. But I think we've held you here long enough, and I'm sure Soda wants to shut the stream down and do whatever he wants to do this evening. It was really great to have you here again, and if anybody is watching, make sure to check out Frank's interview on Northern Consultations, and while you're here, like this video, like that video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And Frank, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at FrankieJ29. And of course, the Showdown Rundown every Saturday, 10 a.m. on the Showdown Entertainment Network YouTube channel.
Great. And I can be found on Twitter at Avengers_SOTN. That's Schmoes of the North. And if you head on over to Schmoes of the North on Facebook, I'm an admin over there. You can join our group. We're getting close enough to next season that I can start announcing that we will be updating our fantasy leagues for next season, making a couple of changes, and I will be putting out invites in probably the next month or so to try and drum up interest in that for Yeah, I've been running a fantasy league for this whole season based on the exact same thing as the Schmodown and the point structure, but we made different factions.
Awesome.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to join that, you'll see a post eventually. I will definitely get on that. Do I have to plug anything else? We definitely, well, our Northern consultations with Adam Witt and Eric Zipper, and possibly something for the horror free for all. We have not decided what we're covering for that yet. So for me, for Soda, for the rest of the Schmoes of the North, and for Frank Janish, everybody have a good day or evening, and good night.